I was driving down the road one day with my wife, and she turns to me and goes, "Jarryd, you grew up in a ridiculously athletic family. It's kind of obnoxious, really." I thought about what she said, and as usual, she was right. We were the kind of family that went to Disney and stayed at ESPN Worldwide Sports Hotel because who doesn't like sports that much? I'm sure most of you didn't even realize that Disney had an ESPN Worldwide Sports Hotel. We were the kind of family that woke up early on Saturday mornings and found a 5K road race or fun run anywhere remotely close to the town that we lived in, and we ran in it. It makes sense why middle school kids didn't want to ride the bus home with me on Friday afternoons for a sleepover party. Not the Wallace house, they go on Saturday morning torture runs. Guess I can't blame them, but we loved that time together as a family, and we racked up quite a few medals as well. I did grow up in a ridiculously athletic family, though. My mom was a Canadian national champion runner who came to University of Georgia on a full track scholarship. My dad came to University of Georgia and played tennis underneath the late Dan McGill. Dad is currently the head women's tennis coach at the University of Georgia, and he's been the head coach there for the last 38 years. He's the nation's most active, winningest coach in college tennis. Most recently achieved his 800th career victory. You could say I have some pretty big shoes to fill athletically, but I loved sport and I loved competition, and I knew that if I worked hard enough, I could follow in my parents' footsteps. So that's what I did. After playing tennis competitively for 6 years, I laid down the tennis racket and started running. My junior year of high school, I won 2 individual state titles and signed to run track at the University of Georgia. My biggest dreams were coming true, but what I didn't realize is that the biggest transition of my life was about to begin. During my sophomore and junior of high school, I was battling injuries and found out I ultimately had something called chronic exertional compartment syndrome. Now, that's a fancy medical term for saying that I had too much pressure built up in my calves and it was cutting off nerve function and blood flow to my foot. It felt a lot like shin splints or stress fractures, and the only way to get rid of it was through having a surgery. Thankfully, the surgery was only a 6-week active recovery, and I'd be back running pain-free my senior year and go on to have a great collegiate career. Unfortunately, I had complications in that surgery that caused me to lose 60% of the muscle from my knee down. Spent the next 2.5 years having a total of 10 reconstructive surgeries trying to save my leg. Everything I hoped for was gone. And all I was left with was a deformed limb and more pain than I could imagine, both mentally and physically. I lost my purpose in life. I was so angry at God. And I was devastated that I'd never be able to run again. Over the last decade, I've come to realize that change is inevitable. Whether it's controlled change, like stepping away from a bad work environment or leaving a toxic relationship, maybe starting that business you always wanted started, or uncontrolled change, like getting let go from a job that you love, or maybe finding out a medical diagnosis you weren't expecting, or losing a loved one or someone close to you. All of these things are a very real part of the human journey, but I believe the philosopher Heraclitus says it best. Change is the only constant in life. I believe the change that is inevitable for all of us can best be managed through a process I call mastering transitions. Mastering transitions can be defined as learning to manage with excellence the space between where you are and where you want to be. Now, I wasn't always great at this, but the things that I learned coming in and out of the OR from one surgery to the next, from the highest of highs, the lowest of lows, has helped drive and develop this process. The mastering transition process is broken up into 3 phases: relationship, ownership, and execution. Now, some of these phases are easier than others to walk through, but all of them should be seen and valued and considered as you go through your transition process. They're meant to be a guide, but ultimately they should lead you to ask yourself the question, what is required of me? You see, mastering transitions is not about helping you find yourself. It's about helping you create the person that you want to become. So let's get started. The first phase of the mastering transition process is relationships. They are the nucleus behind every transition you find yourself in, and they are built around one key variable: trust. According to the Survey Center on American Life, people have fewer close friendships, talk to their friends less often, and rely less on their friends for support. What an astonishing statistic and a sad reality, considering that when it comes to information and technology, we're the most connected society to date. I've defined relationships as the support you have and your willingness to grow. You see, it's the connections that we have with others that actually help narrate our stories. Sometimes these relationships are built on years of trust, and sometimes they come at the most unexpected moments. In a last effort to see if there was anything I could do about my deformed limb, I went and got a second opinion. It was during this encounter where I developed an unexpected relationship with a doctor who forever changed the direction of my life. And he did so by simply meeting me where I was. While sitting in his office and explaining the last 3 years of my life and the trauma that I had faced, both mentally and physically, he asked me a question I wasn't prepared to answer. He said, "Jarryd, what do you want to do with your life?" After contemplating this question for a little while, I blurted out, "I want to be pain-free. Love to be able to run again, but I just want to live a normal life. Lord willing, one day have kids and play with them in the yard, maybe coach their soccer team." It was hard for me to think about these things and have these dreams in the moment where I'm staring down at a leg that wouldn't allow most of those things to come true. He smiled and looked at me and said, "Man, it's a beautiful life, but as you may know, with the leg you've got, I just don't think that's possible. But if you consider having your leg amputated, I believe those things could come true." Now, this wasn't the first time I heard the idea of amputation, but for the first time, it was less about the amputation. It was more about the life the amputation would allow. I left that appointment with one question left to answer: what is required of me? Although the answer to that question is now clear, it took someone who could speak clearly and with confident conviction. No matter how hard it was for me to hear those words, I needed someone to wake me up from the woe is me state that I was in and say, "Jarryd, your life is not over." Matter of fact, if you consider to have your leg amputated, you may have the greatest second chance life has to offer. You see, relationships are the foundation of every transition we find ourselves in, because they are the vehicle most often used to bring us to a place of acceptance. And it's that acceptance of our current reality and the understanding that we're not alone that allows you to ask yourself the question, what is required of me? Second phase of the mastering transition process is ownership. Ownership can be defined as what you think and how you behave. I heard this story one time of a kid. He was a junior in high school and didn't like school, wasn't good at it, and told his mom, "I'm going to drop out." She begged him, "Please just take the SAT before you make that decision." He agreed to take the SAT. He didn't do any study prep, no surprise there, but test day came, he showed up. A couple weeks later, he gets his test score back, and he scored a 1480 out of 1600. Based on his grades in school, his mom was convinced that he had cheated on the test. "Mom, I promise you I didn't cheat. Based on how the Scantron was set up, based on how we were set up in the classroom, there was no way that I could cheat." And he finished up his junior year. He came back his senior year, and he started doing things that he felt smart people did. He went to class, asked questions, did his homework, studied for tests. He eventually went on and graduated from high school, went to community college, made it to Wichita State University, and he actually got into an Ivy League school. Became a global magazine entrepreneur. 12 years later, he gets a letter in the mail from Princeton, New Jersey. Not thinking anything of it, he opens the letter, and apparently the SAT board periodically reviews past test-taking policies and procedures. In the year that he took the test, he was one of 13 people that got sent the wrong test score. His actual score was a 740. People used to always tell him, man, your life changed when you got that 1480. Well, now he tells people, no, my life changed when I started acting like a 1480. It's one of the best stories I've ever heard about how powerful our thoughts can be and how those thoughts can shape the way that we behave. Now, although the idea of taking ownership seems easy, walking through this process is the most vital part of any transition you go through. The ownership process is broken down into 4 truths. Truth number 1, what you think determines what you believe. You see, beliefs create our reality. And as we just heard, 1480 is one powerful belief. Next, what you believe determines what you value. And values identify what is important to you. They are your undeniable truths and help shape your habits. Next, what you value reveals your purpose. You see, purpose gives meaning to life, shows who you are, why you're here. And finally, your purpose ultimately defines your vision. And vision is a clear and mental picture of what could be, fueled by the conviction that it should be. You see, ownership is not just about taking responsibility, it's about knowing who you are. It's a process of self-discovery that goes beyond wishing and thinking and takes you to a place where you become the person that you want to be. It's that type of ownership that challenges the question, what is required of me? The final stage of the mastering transition process is execution. This is where the rubber meets the road, and you get to bring your vision to life. Where the first 2 phases of the mastering transition process were internally focused, the final phase of the mastering transition process is externally focused. Execution is where you get to show the world and those around you what you do and why you do it. And ultimately, it pushes you to answer the question, what is required of me? As a 3-time Paralympian and 4-time world record holder, I believe there's no greater example around the concept of execution than the 100-meter dash. 100-meter dash is broken up into 3 phases. The acceleration phase, which is between 0 and 30 meters. Top speed, which happens somewhere between 40 and 80 meters. And the deceleration phase, which occurs somewhere between 80 and 100 meters. You see, most people think that the winner of the 100-meter dash is the person who runs the fastest. That is a common misconception. The person who wins the 100-meter dash is the person who slows down the slowest. See, in a 100-meter dash, every person decelerates at some point during the race. And it's all about setting up your race in a way to minimize that distance. With the human body only being able to run top speed somewhere between 10 and 30 meters, it makes it that much more important what happens during the other portions of the race. Now, there's no such thing as a perfect 100-meter race. In a matter of 9 to 10 seconds, 42 to 50 steps, and 12 to 15 breaths, so many things can go wrong. But perfection is not the goal. As an elite athlete, if my aim was perfection, I would never finish a race. You see, mistakes are inevitable and even occur in world record performances. But it's not about the mistakes that are made. It's about how you handle those mistakes and continue moving forward that determines the outcome. Now listen, it is paramount during your execution process to give yourself room to make small mistakes, to adjust, and continue moving forward with the end goal in mind. Mastering transitions is a journey that we all must go through. If you are in a season of transition, it's time to take control of that process and your journey towards hope, healing, or success or recovery. See, the three phases of the mastering transition process is designed as a guide to help us through our most unknown seasons of life. Relationships will bring you to a place of acceptance. Ownership will bring you to a place of self-discovery. And execution will bring you to a place of fulfillment. So wherever you're moving towards, you can't expect to blindly get there. You must get there with purpose. You must get there with intention. And you must get there by asking yourself, what is required of me?